Welcome to a special edition of the Game Masters Book Club, recorded live at Rising Phoenix GameCon in Milford, Mass. On Saturday, April 26th, at a Critical Chat, one of the con's lunchtime panels, I sat down with 3 DMs who were attending the convention and chatted with them about their D&D experiences and about book-based characters that they've brought to their own campaign and what they're reading now for inspiration in their own games. Big thanks to those DMs, Dan Collins of the Wandering DMs podcast, Pat French, who's a Pathfinder game designer, and Neal Devlin, a Gen Con game master and GUI Cube game master. Let's go to the conversation live at Rising Phoenix GameCon.
I don't have any waivers here, but does everybody agree to be recorded since this is a podcast?
Yes, please.
All right, fantastic. We have verbal agreement. Michael, they all said they want to be recorded. Okay, so that's great. Fantastic. All right, so yes, you can't escape now. Yes, thank you to Michael St. Air, who brought all the cool recording equipment that makes this at all possible. Normally, the Game Masters Book Club is a book club where we get together as GMs and we talk about books that we choose to read. So far, we've done, currently published, there is Stephen King's Fairy Tale. There's Becky Chambers' Robot and Monk Duology, which we've done, and the third one that's currently out is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. We have more coming out, so I've got 4 in the can, as it were, that are still waiting to get processed because doing audio editing is still new to me, so that's been fun. But really what it comes down to is I'm a game master. I enjoy reading books. I steal all kinds of things from books when I read them. In fact, I think some of the earliest memories that I have about Dungeons & Dragons are when I took out the Greek mythology book from my local library and I said, wow, look at that Hermes guy. He does all these cool things where he steals stuff, and he stole that cattle, and he has a magic Asclepius wand. What's an Asclepius wand? What does that do? And since literally since 1979 till now, that's what I've been doing. I've been reading books and putting them into my games. A more recent version of this would be, have any of you read the Vorkosigan series by Lois McMaster-Bujold? A fantastic science fiction piece, really interesting main character, but what I stole from it was that our main character is actually born out of a uterine replicator. So they take the uterus out and they put it into like a little canister, and that's where the baby grows, so they don't have to grow in the mom. This is standard practice in some cultures, but in his culture it's sort of an emergency thing that happens. Great stories, by the way, if you get a chance to read them. And I thought, well, what if I took that and combined it with the dwarf fiction that there are only male dwarves. And the dwarves are great craftspeople, right? So they could make a uterine replicator if they had the wherewithal and they had maybe their god's help for the first one or something. So that's the basis of all of the dwarves in the current campaign that I'm running, which is based around the idea that there really are no female dwarves. They're all male dwarves. Everybody's male. They all get together and they all make more male dwarves. So today, it's fun to explore where all these great ideas come from. So today, I thought I'd come to the con. We're here at Rising Phoenix, April 2025, and I have some nice, lovely people who I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. And after you introduce yourself, just so everyone gets a chance to know what kind of gamer you are, let's go classic and say, has everyone here played D&D? I know it's kind of the baseline.
A couple
I get
times.
it. A lot of the stuff that we talk about, we try and go beyond D&D, but that's not. But D&D is great it has its thing and it does it well.
It's good to have a common language,
and most people play it. So so give me your name, like how long you've been playing, and what's your favorite D&D class.
Great.
Why don't we start over here with, I think that's Dan.
Yes, so I'm Dan Collins, and if it's okay, Eric, I have my own podcast, Wandering DMs.
Plug it.
With my good friend Paul Siegel as co-host, and we're on YouTube and Twitch and podcast sites, so it's Wandering DMs. So I have been playing D&D, I think like you, since I think 79 is when I started. With Holmes Blue Book Basic. I play a lot of D&D. I play that predominantly. And the funny thing is that over time, I've kind of regressed in what I play. So I was playing, first edition AD&D in the 80s, and then it was a little bit before my time, but then later on I discovered original D&D, from 74, and I decided I actually like that better. It's a little more minimalist. You can shape it more to what you and the DM and the players kind of prefer. So I actually play, I think, lightly house-ruled original D&D is what I play mostly for my fantasy gaming. And I currently have, if you remember the 80s TSR Star Frontiers science fiction game. So I've been running a classic Star Frontiers campaign for about a year and a month at this point.
Wow.
With some much younger players, like around 30. And we're having a blast with it, actually.
Much younger players around
Right?
30.
Yeah, right? So some people criticize me for being a little bit narrow-focused, that I kind of want to dig into a game and really understand it. And so I played a lot of D&D and not a whole lot of other stuff. But that's my history, basically.
Just to be fair, one of the reasons why I started this book club is so I would be forced to find new things and try new things.
Great.
But I am primarily a D&D player as well.
Right.
I'm usually, when I invite other people on the show, it's like, hi, you play all these cool games and I'm the D&D player. Let's do it.
Right.
I'm Pat French. I don't have a podcast to plug, but I do have a book coming out hopefully in the next month on Pathfinder Infinity called the Doomworks Field Manual. So if you're listening to this and it's a month later, and please look on Pathfinder Infinity.
I guarantee you it will be more than a month before it gets up. No matter how fast I am, it's still going to take a month for it to get up.
I've been playing since, so probably like 30 years, like the mid-90s I started playing, so it was whatever shape 2nd edition AD&D was at that time. I started with like the kit and went from there, and then I was 3rd edition and 3.5 obviously was really that was like my home for D&D, and then it was such a great era because there was all the other D20 system games, and you could really just find almost anything, and none of it was balanced to each other, even within its own system, so it was still great. So that, and Vampire the Masquerade, obviously the same era, and I'm really, really into Pathfinder now. That's my main thing, Pathfinder 2nd edition. I buy every book. I'm very addicted, and that's my book is in that system. The Doomworks Field Manual is the source book for that. And I'm running some games with it this weekend. Neal was at one yesterday.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Neal?
Hi. My name's Neal Devlin. I don't have a podcast or a book, but I'm a game master. I got into D&D back in 2008. Didn't have a job, and a friend was like, "Want to play D&D?" I'm like, "Sure." And then played off and on. Then we actually switched to Pathfinder, started 3.5, flew in Pathfinder, then played that on and off. And then, it was quiet for a bit. And then what changed a lot of things was the pandemic. I started playing Pathfinder 2nd edition. I love Pathfinder 2nd edition. But I met this guy on a Facebook group, and he helped me start running games and being my GM mentor. And then he introduced me to this thing called the GUI Cube. They are a Denver-based company. Then they make modules for 5th edition, and they're fantastic. And long story short, I ended up, for the past couple of years, I've been running for the GUI Cube at Gen Con, Gary Con, Genghis Con, as a GUI Cube GM and having a great time. And I also, my main focus now is I want to run more games. I also want to play different systems. I have a DCC shirt on today. I know audio people can't see my shirt, but imagine one.
And a Gary Con hat. So
yeah, Gary Con hat, yep. But I've been trying to play DCC, more Pathfinder 2, more 5e. 13. I was in the 13th Age. I was in Pat's Doomworks game. I've also been playing stuff like Morkborg, Dragonbane, Pirate Board. Just trying to diversify and play different systems just to see what else is out there.
See what we can steal, right? That's
Yeah,
always the best part.
absolutely.
Cool.
So Dan, what is your preferred D&D class?
Oh, as a player?
Yeah.
See, the funny thing is that I was almost never a player, so I get started at a point where there weren't any other people that knew what D&D was.
Okay.
So I was actually always the DM since day one, since I opened the box. I honestly, if I sit at a table, I usually try to help the rest of the team, and I'm usually the last person to pick to make sure that I get something that assists the rest of the team. So if I had an open field, I'd probably pick fighter. Weirdly, I usually wind up playing clerics a lot of the time.
Oh, shock.
Because
I was just going to say.
it's
I like to support everything everybody does.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll say the really ridiculous thing is the number one thing that I house rule in my own D&D game is I prohibit clerics. There are no clerics. There are no good player clerics in my games. And then ironically, I wind up playing them all the time in other people's games. So there's a weird yin-yang in my life about which side of the table I'm on. And I usually wind up my longest running character that I had in a long running campaign was a cleric.
There you go.
Yeah.
When I started, I was one of the first people to keep playing too.
Yep.
But my father actually just found the Dungeons and Dragons thing for me. He was
Great.
a mathematics professor, or rather, mathematics high school teacher.
Great.
And he was working with some kids, and a kid came up to him and said, "Oh, Mr. Jackson, I'm trying to buy a new car," and he's just selling everything he has. And my dad's a geometry teacher, so he sees all this graph paper and all these geometric solids, and he's like, "You say kids play this game?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he's like, "My son enjoys a good fantasy book. Perhaps I shall bring this home." My father did not speak like that at all. But my dad brought it home for me over an April break, just like this would be for kids right now.
Yeah.
So it was a winter break. He brought it over for me for a February break, and he ran my first dungeon for me. So and he was my DM for a little while,
That's
and then
awesome.
I eventually took over for other people. So yeah.
I should also point out that I'm also a math professor for my day job.
Oh,
so
my
that's very
goodness.
close to my heart, Eric.
There you go. Yeah. I'm talking about it. Like the first thing I learned about D&D was like, what is the probability of rolling an 18 on 3d6? Like I learned the probability theory from D&D.
I would argue that that's why I have a math career, actually. It's like digging into D&D and those kinds of questions is probably what put me on the path to be having a job, frankly.
There we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So classic D&D class. I hate to say cleric again, but the
Woo,
3-5,
Pat,
but
another
the 3-5 cleric was so good, and I miss it so much. Like the 3-5 cleric could like wear armor and use shields, and they haven't really gotten back to that. I feel. Although clerics in 5e are pretty powerful. I shouldn't crap on
The
that.
domain,
but, like,
once they started adding domains, they really became they became way more interesting. So I agree
that
with
was
you.
so like. And again, forever DM experience in a lot of cases. If I get to expand it out of D&D, I want to say Pathfinder Inventor is my favorite class, though.
Ooh, nice.
Because that is a fun class. That is a fun.
Is that
fun
like
class.
the Artificer? I haven't played a lot of Pathfinder.
I haven't played an Artificer, so it's hard
Okay,
to be certain. It is. You can use magic stuff, but it is specifically non-magical creation of items. So I think Artificer is a little bit.
Artificer's a little more mix of the two.
Yeah.
If you've ever read the comic Girl Genius by Phil and Cachafolio,
Yes.
that like the spark magic makes things that don't normally work. Because if you put all those gears together, they wouldn't work. But because I'm magical, that's more the Artificer.
Yeah.
And yours is a bit more physics oriented.
Yes, at least in terms of the class, and then as you're leveling up, you have the ability to gain those magic things and create magic items and take the items that you're creating and add magical elements to them, and I love that. But I love just the putting stuff together aspect of it. If you're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition right now and you want a class that just does an absurd amount of damage, I cannot stress how powerful Weapon Inventor is. Weapon Inventor is so powerful. Construct Inventor too.
Do you get guns?
You can get guns.
Guns.
I mean, it's from the Guns and Gears books, so
so
depending on how your DM is playing and what their world looks like, there might be some push and pull on that. But generally speaking, if you're playing one of those classes, you should have access to those items. So
there you go. Neal?
So your listeners are going to be like, he's going to say it, and yes, I'm going to say it, cleric. I love clerics.
there's a GM thing.
Yeah. What you were saying earlier, I also will shift to wherever my party needs me. But I love playing clerics just because not only they can heal, they can also generally do damage themselves. They're also versatile, so you're not just always swinging a sword. You're doing multiple things.
And you have that immediate tie into the world, right?
Yes.
Like you don't have to work for it. You don't have to build anything else. You can just be like, I worship the Raven Queen. I worship Cthulhu. I worship, I worship Zeus. Whatever you're going to pick, right? So you have that immediate tie-in, and that starts you onto the world-building thing, which I think, obviously, as GMs, we're all, we want to be attached to that. Sort of thing.
I don't know if there's a small thread with clerics of like we're DMs, and it's like, now you got to listen to me because I'm the cleric.
Okay, there's yet another.
Well, I don't know what you think, but God told me.
Just a little aside.
So yeah, I'm not God, but I'm talking for it. So there you go. It seems fair. All right. So I feel like I'm going to buck the trend here. I have two basic types of characters that I play. Up until very recently, I would have 100% said Paladin all the way.
Okay.
And I think part of that is, yeah, I know. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that. Thank Michael giving me the look like, oh, really? I'm so shocked. Yeah, so I'm a Paladin guy. I do like, again, for me, it's the lore tie-in. It's I like having a code and doing a thing and being sort of, and also speaking for my deity, as it were, and having that authority as it is. But I spent 20 years as a high school teacher, so I tend to flow a little into bard now as well. And I do like the idea of like having all the knowledge. Like if I can't be in charge, I want all the knowledge, right? And that's the way both of those two things go. So, given that we know like where you're coming from and what kind of characters you like to play, and I assume you have all read books before, do you have a favorite character that you have either already brought into a campaign that you've run, like a favorite character from a book, or one that you've cleverly disguised to be, like this is clearly so-and-so, but I call him this in my campaign? Is there a character from a book that you've brought into your campaign, and who are they and what do they do?
Interesting. The thing I would say is, and I was just talking to my co-host Paul about this morning, is that a lot of the overall sensibility of just how magic and wizards work in the world, for me, comes from very old school pulp traditions where wizards mostly weren't good guys at all. So if I look at something like Elric, if you're a wizard dealing with magic, you're inherently kind of dealing with sketchy forces all the time, has really informed a lot about how the backstory of wizards in general work in the world. And we were just talking about, in my world, most of the time, I'm assuming that there aren't any really good high-level wizards. And that might not be evident to the player character at lower level, but maybe at some higher level, it's going to be revealed that all the wizardly magic in the world is tainted in some way. And I largely get that kind of thing from the Elric books, or, in the Conan books, there aren't any really good wizards either. So that kind of inspiration very much, I can see the DNA of that in the original D&D rules. And it's nice that those things synthesize for me. And I probably, if I hadn't been reading those books, I probably wouldn't think about it that way.
Go. And you did exactly what would have been the next thing I would have said, was like, is there a system that you would choose? And obviously that's your preferred system.
Exactly.
And that's how that all ties in.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Keep going in the way we've been going, Pat.
So I don't know that I have a specific character from this series, but is anyone familiar with Robert Asprin's Myth Adventure books?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's like that's a vibe I like to bring to my worlds a lot. It's very like, there's comedic aspect to it, and one of my favorite things, like trope-wise, is the idea that the most powerful magician is just a freaking liar. Mm-hmm. And that, like, the most powerful thing they can do is lie to you effectively. And that happens a lot in those books. Like, I think the best example off the top of my head is the main character has, like, these rings that are just like these tchotchkes, and that the only enchantment on them is that the rings don't come off. But he convinces this, like, king and queen who are getting married, and they don't want to get married, and they want to kill each other, and it's going to be this whole thing. He convinces them that should they hurt one another, the rings are bonded, and it will, like, if you stab her, you'll take a stab wound, and so on. And it's just a total lie. It's just total fabrication. But it works, and it moves him forward in the world, and I really like that as a thing. But there's other great examples, like in Willow. The end of Willow is him doing his disappearing pig trick, and it defeats Brav Morda, the incredibly evil, incredibly powerful magic user, because she can't figure it out. And she's just straight, what spell was that? I've never heard of that spell before. What in the world, And so I don't know. I really like that vibe in it, like the idea that, like, And to put it in terms of like a GM situation, like have your players like they think that they're dealing with a really powerful person and they're not. You know, they're just being lied to and like they're not passing their perception checks to sense motive or whatever. So I always really like that idea of it. That's always like kind of stuck with me vibe-wise.
So the clever use of magic.
Yeah, or the clever use of not magic.
Right.
Like, I would say Infinity War has a great example too, when Doctor Strange is fighting the dude at the beginning with the telekinesis, and he can't get the Mind Stone from him, and he says it's a simple spell but quite powerful or something, and it's just a lie. Yeah. That's not the Mind Stone. He's hiding it over his shoulder invisibly, the same way that Loki was hiding one. It's the most obvious thing in the Marvel movies. That's where everything is. It's right over someone's right shoulder. But like, but it works. I guess it's a freaking telepath. I think. I don't know. It's mind powers. Like, you know. Like.
Neal?
I'm a little different. I've been trying to read more, but I generally run like pre-written modules and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So all those characters are brought in, but if I have to create something on the fly, I used to be a Ghostbuster. I have a proton pack, I have the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did a bunch of like the St. Patrick's Day Parade, March with the Ghostbusters, etc.
Wow.
So I will sometimes bring like the archetype of like the guys into a role-playing game, like Ray, kind of like the heart, or like the cockiness of Peter Venkman and stuff like that. But generally, and I've also played the West End Games Ghostbusters RPG.
Oh, wow.
Which was...
I didn't know they had one. Okay.
Yeah, it came out in the 80s, I believe. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. It's a great premise.
Yes.
Yeah. Franchise.
Well,
so you
yeah,
can play
Monster,
Ghostbusters
yeah, and now you're
city.
doing Monster of the Week,
Yeah.
though. In this case, the trope, not the game.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what we were doing is we were playing ourselves. So we were role-playing ourselves as Ghostbusters. Well, actually, so it was kind of meta, but it was...
That can be a little embarrassing, though, when you start realizing how low your skill levels are in so many things. That's always tough to play yourself. You're like, I'm really only a 2 there. That's tough.
A very, very toxic experience years ago where someone surprised the group with, this is what we're doing, and it was that. It was, you're playing yourself, and he had made the sheets.
Oh!
Everyone, it was,
Yeah.
That's a little rough.
It was real cringe, yeah.
You really? Wow, my charisma's that low.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I noticed your sheet's real nice. What are all these skills you have that no one else has?
I find if you ask people to gauge their own ability levels, for role players, there's a real preponderance that they'll say that their intelligence is 18. And I find that really, and, role players are very, tasteful, intelligent people, but man, there's a lot of 18s when people stab themselves out.
Oh, my goodness. All right, so Neal, we're going to reverse here because you had said you hadn't been reading quite as much, but we're going to do the last part here where we're going to talk about like books that you've read or things or media that you've watched that you're currently drawing inspiration from for either your games or what you're doing. And you obviously you hit us with the Ghostbuster thing, but do you have a second piece of media?
I actually have every single Pathfinder 2 book, so I take a lot of inspiration from that world, and so I'll read a bunch and just pick up different story notes that they, because there is each of the adventure paths have a story and they actually affect the world and stuff.
And there's a lot of really great writers out there.
Oh.
One of them's at the table, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe a little pandering, but But there's a lot of really great stories that you can be found inside your quote unquote average game.
On the other side, which I mentioned earlier, Ghoulie Cube. They have a lot of great writers. They're also getting a lot of. Last year they did the Tomb of Guys and Gax Kickstarter, where they worked with Luke Guy Gax, and Ed Greenwood writes some things, I believe. So I read a lot of published adventures. So I'll read a lot of that stuff, and I'll take things or maybe a little bit to either flow better or...
Sign of a great DM, being able to jump to take that right off the top there.
So for my book, I think the Wizard of Oz world is one of the big things I've drawn a lot of inspiration from, because it is a really fun mix of... There is magic, and there's 18th century industrial revolution kind of technology. There's a train, there's cog working stuff, there's steam powered things. So I definitely draw a lot of inspiration from that. Also, I really love that Oz is maybe the most American fantasy, like in terms of a big fantasy concept. I mean, there's probably another example that's newer that I'm not thinking of.
But it's but to be honest, it's the kind of thing where everything is going to draw from that, right?
Yeah.
You know, so.
And, well, like when you think about that, certainly D&D, you're usually thinking about a very European fantasy kind of world, whether that's Renaissance or medieval. And like, if we have a dwarf character show up, what's our default accent? We jump to Scottish or something, right? Like, if we have a royalty character, what's our default accent? We try to do a Christopher Lee impression or something like that, versus like, and it's kind of going back to the myth adventure books. I just like characters who, I don't know, Americans, we have this very scrappy, like, swindler aspect to ourselves, it is very like godless capitalist
very caveat emptor, right?
Yeah,
like buyer beware.
Yeah, the movie version of Wicked we bought as soon as it was available, and I watched that like 4 dozen times while I was writing, because it's a great movie, great musical, but also like it's just the vibe of that world is very much like kind of what I'm looking for in terms of writing, where there can be that mix of things, but it's not explicitly just a steampunk world. It's not explicitly just a fantasy world. And then, I don't know.
There you go.
I trailed off again, sorry.
No, you're good. So it's okay. We'll fix it in post. So go ahead, Jim.
That's great. So if I can bring up a comic book, in the last, specifically a Marvel comic book, in the last, I think 5 or 6 years, there was a comic book called The Immortal Hulk. And I'm embarrassed that I can't think of what the creators' names are, but I recently got, there you go. So I recently got the Immortal Hulk Omnibus that collects all, and they did 50 issues plus some side stuff, and it collects all of the issues they did it's about this big. It's about 1,500 pages, I believe.
Wow.
So
okay.
it's roughly Hulk size.
That's a brick.
It's enormous.
That's 2 bricks.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of exercise just picking the thing up. And it's gorgeous. And what they do, and it's not a what if, it's mainline Marvel continuity, but they recast the story of the Incredible Hulk as a horror story. And so they really lean into the body. It's like an ongoing Cronenberg horror film. And they really lean into the body horror of changing form, and it really becomes a really horrible way that the Hulk changes form. Everybody around him is unpredictable and chaotic. People are getting absorbed into other people's bodies in terrifying ways, right? And it really digs into like Bruce Banner waking up in the morning. I don't know where I've been. There's a trail of destruction behind me. I'm in a different town than I thought I was. I don't know how I got here. And they also ramp up. He's psychologically dissonant, so he has multiple personalities. And I think I'm at the point where they have about 6. There's at least 6 different personalities that are in contention. And when they transform, who came out? It's like unclear to begin with who's currently in control. And sometimes that works to their advantage, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's a really interesting, different take on it. Usually when I bring this up to people, they go, "What? The Hulk is horror?" And it doesn't immediately click for them. My friend Paul has his own lightweight horror game called Fearful Ends, which is really neat. And I've been thinking about how can I run a game with the Immortal Hulk, maybe with Fearful Ends, or maybe I should actually use a Marvel rule set, and struggling with, should this be like the support team around the Hulk? Should I have different players as different personalities of the Hulk? Or that seems like a really hard problem to solve. So I'm still working on that, but I think some of the body horror is creeping into my Star Frontiers game. So at least some of my players have said, every single monster has like tentacles, and they're dripping acid, and they're poisonous, and they grab you and try to swallow you, and they're kind of like, everything is all covered with tentacles all the time now. So I think that's probably the way that's seeped into my current game. But I'd love to try to run an Immortal Hulk game, but at the moment I'm not seeing the solution.
Can I give a suggestion?
Please,
okay,
please.
So one of the things that happens with kids on bikes is that there's a central character that everybody controls on occasion.
Well, okay.
And they're all like, you're our support character.
Yeah.
But everyone gets a turn at playing 11, yeah. Everyone gets a chance to play. Like, they take a turn with 11, but they all have their own characters.
Goonies, though, and I was assuming it was Chunk.
Well, that's also fair. Yeah, yes,
Chunk,
also
sorry,
fair.
Sloth,
Also, everyone gets to be Sloth. Sloth! Yes, everyone gets to shout Sloth and go anymore. But yeah, so that might be an interesting way to sort of have either you could do multiple personalities and have everyone be a personality, or you could have that support staff, and then when the purple personality takes over, you know that's Neal's job to he runs the purple personality, and you could even do it like that way, so you'd have a character and a personality that each person would be responsible for. That would work.
I think I was starting to orbit around that, and it's interesting because do you remember when TSR published Conan modules for D&D back then? So I just read a couple of them in some reviews recently. The complaint in the review was, well, someone plays Conan, the rest of the support staff, and obviously they're the star. So that's kind of unbalanced. So I think that actually is a pretty good solution to there's clearly a main star to the story, but everybody should have a chance to somehow participate with that.
Yeah, no one is ever 11 or Conan.
Right.
Everyone is, and then you're somebody else too.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Or if you wanted to do it in the episode by episode version, you could do. Have you heard of Ars Magica?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, Ars Magica does troop play, where like I'm the wizard this week, you're my trusty stalwart companion, and you two guys are minions. And then next week I'm a minion, you're the wizard, you're the stalwart companion, and it moves around that way so that each adventure somebody plays something else. If you wanted to do more of a issue by issue with the Hulk, you could do it that way as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Those are good ideas.
You left out like the best part though, like how he turns into the Hulk now. It's not just because he's angry; it's because he gets killed generally, right? Like
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Or someone kills Banner. Like
correct. So it's often it's called the Immortal Hulk because Banner can get killed, the Hulk can't. So the Hulk comes back to life at night after Banner's dead.
From Banner's
corpse.
What
happened. So Banner's
basically
being
hatches
murdered.
out of Banner. Oh my god!
Yes, exactly.
This is why I don't play horror games this much.
Right.
Oh, I'm too grossed out. All
right.
Fantastic.
I normally don't either, but this story's kind of got me sucked in.
And that's what's really great about it. I mean, you can do. T. Kingfisher is one of the authors that we've already covered so far, and they've written a bunch of really interesting fantasy horror books. They recently put one out, but it's basically House to Uberville, like classic horror, but retold. So there's a lot of really good fantasy horror out there to draw from, so that's pretty cool. One of the books that we recorded, but isn't out yet, is The Black God's Drums. And that is a pseudo-fantasy steampunk Civil War piece, so I think you'd probably like that. And Ghostbusters and or great games to read. I'm trying to think, what was the game that I read? There have been a couple. The game that I enjoyed the background the most on, and then I enjoyed the stories that got told with it, is an old game which has a terrible but interesting mechanic. It's called Castle Falkenstein. And it has a mechanic that you don't use dice, you use playing cards. And so you have your own deck, and they're randomly sorted, and when you pull like clubs, it has this kind of effect, and you pull. It's very complicated and kludgy, and it doesn't work really well. But the world building, based around the idea that fairies really exist and control parts of Europe, and this whole fae thing that's happening there, it's just great stories. And there's a whole American aspect to it too. They Six Guns and Sorcery, really fantastic stuff. So Falkenstein, Black God's Drums, and anything by T. Kingfisher, all their fantasy has a little bit of horror. So.
Sounds like great.
Also, I found the author
P. Jelly Clark.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes.
Like two of the games I think you mentioned sound like Deadlands, because Deadlands was like Wild West kind of stuff, but you also had
card-based
cards. As it wasn't just cards though, right?
You're
cards
right.
and dice, it was like too complicated. I think.
Yeah, another way too complicated thing. And in that I know in the episode where we talk about that, Deadlands definitely comes up. It's definitely one of our main suggestions.
Great.
All right, gentlemen, I know you've plugged some things already, but this is the end part of the show. So take a minute and tell us one more time who you are and stuff you're doing and people you're working with, and what do you want to plug so that my piddly little podcast can at least inform some other folks what's going on.
So again, I've been Dan Collins, and my other show is Wandering DMs on YouTube and Twitch. And Eric, I do think that listeners of your show would enjoy our show. We totally dig into the texts and the books is exactly what we like to do. So I think that would be a good crossover actually with my co-host Paul. We're live on YouTube every Sunday at 1. and they can go to our website, wanderingdms.com, and see everything that we do there.
Fantastic. Pat?
My name once again is Pat French. I have a book coming out sometime in May, the DoomWorks Field Manual. It's going to be available on Pathfinder Infinite. It's written by me. It's got art by my friend Ryan Barch, who's pretty amazing.
Ooh, shout out the artists.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find his stuff on Instagram is probably the main place. He has lots to sell. I also have a Patreon I just started. I'm gradually getting a real digital presence created.
It's a struggle, man.
It's a
struggle.
Patreon, and it's under. It's called Vaudevillainous. So, vaudeville and the word villainous combined.
Everybody sign up and join. Neal?
I've been Neal Devlin. The biggest thing is I'll be at Gen Con running games for Gilly Cube.
Like it's nothing. I'm going to be running games for Gen Con.
Yeah,
that's all I'm doing. Little thing. Biggest convention in the world. Yeah, it's fine.
But when they release games, if you check out Gilly Cube, there's probably a chance to run games for you.
Well, there you go.
And when I run games, I'm only running one this week. I was able to get, I don't think everyone has them, but the little flags on the name badges.
Yeah.
One thing that I do is I ordered, only because I like orange and green, they're orange and green tags that say I played in one of GM Neal's games.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if you're playing one of my games, you'll get one.
So free, and free stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
So my name's Eric Jackson, and I'm the host of the Game Masters Book Club, which you've been listening to. Special thanks to our folks here at Rising Phoenix that allowed us to use up one of their critical chats, which is happening here on Saturday, April
26th,
2025. And thank you all for being here on the podcast. I have been back for some other book readings, and
That'd be great.
hope you had a great time.
Yeah, definitely. It was a blast.
All right, thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Are we out?
And that was Dan Collins, Pat French, and Neal Devlin at Rising Phoenix GameCon 2025. Ginormous thanks to Michael St. Air, friend, boon companion, and amazing sound technician. If you need tech help for your event anywhere in New England, you should contact Michael St. Air at linktr.ee/STAYRE. Continued thanks to John Corbett for the podcast artwork and Otis Galloway for our theme music. Another gargantuan thank you to Scott Legault and the whole gang at Rising Phoenix GameCon for the opportunity to premiere the live podcast at such an excellent premiere-level convention. One last time, I am Eric Jackson, host of the Game Masters Book Club, part of K-Square Productions. Visit K-Square Productions and the Game Masters Book Club at tinyurl.com/Game Masters Book Club, or follow us at Game Masters Book Club on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Later, gamers, and to paraphrase the great Terry Pratchett, always try to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.